We've got 2 more to go. Today, we're changing slant. We're moving away to a large extent from the canvas per se, and looking at topics and discussions and things around the challenges of managing in times of uncertainty and change, which I think from just what you've been saying is very much what we have at the moment. So the agenda for today is we're going to start off looking at applying the concepts of risk and managing of risks, and then looking at this concept of sustainability and discussing a bit about that. And then, as you've been hearing Chris talk about before, going through in more detail and doing an exercise around crunching your canvas. So that's what it's about. And very much, with this little cartoon here, it's about how do we crystal gaze but be pragmatic about it and actually cope with that journey going forward. So I'm going to talk about the risk side, and where I'm coming from is this whole thing about avoiding ending up on the rocks. It's being prepared and trying to anticipate the possible future, anticipate the unpredictable, like the COVID situation, the world's pandemic. People have been talking about it and nobody really took, well, rephrase it, countries took it seriously. WHO and the Disease Centre and things like that took it seriously, but individual businesses, very few of them took it seriously. So we need to be thinking about business, and this is beyond health and safety. It's the risks that could happen around your own business. So what we're looking at here is getting the right perspective. This course is looking at things from a strategic and tactical perspective. Andy's also been doing the project management course. So Andy, some of this is going to be a repeat, but we're looking at it from a different perspective. A project is at operations level, and we will actually look at an operationals level tool, but we're going to start looking at the strategy. And this is what's really important. And this is where there's been a huge change in businesses around the world. Is if I think back 25 years ago, for instance, from a project perspective, it used to be really difficult to a business to actually take you seriously. And I can remember on some of the things I was involved with, which was transforming businesses totally, particularly from IT perspective and making them IT driven. And I try and tell people, these are things that are going to be hitting us. And I used to feel they were patting me on my head and saying, there, little girl, just go away and stop being pessimistic. Then the whole financial Enron, etc., just burst onto the economic scene, onto the business scene. Companies, consulting companies went bust, etc., over it. And out of that's come this whole thing of there is now a corporate risk requirement and risk reporting that's needed at corporate levels and things. So it's important to look at that strategy, to gaze ahead, to be aware of what's happening, and to think about what the impact is as you're reshaping your business. How are you going to have that flexibility? How are you going to cater for things quickly? What tactics can you use, etc. So let's look at some things around this. So this whole concept of risk and why we bother about it. A very simple basic of looking at risk is if you cannot predict 100% what's going to happen, then the chances are something different will happen. And what this means is when you're looking at your workflow, when you're looking at your customer segments, when you're looking at the products, and we were having a discussion because Mark and Emma joined in earlier about some of the challenges that they have currently, where new things are coming along, like there's a different way of pricing and dealing with importation, which wasn't known before. So this is now causing some uncertainties, some possible some risks, financial risks and things like that. That's the real world we live in. New things are going to be hitting us. Different ways of doing things is going to be hitting us because of Brexit, because of delays in supply chain, etc., and because of the constraints from COVID and lockdowns. So we need to understand these constraints. We need to understand what we're not certain about. What this also means is it's not always negative. It could be an opportunity, a chance to do something different. Now, when we look at risk from a more operational level, what we start saying is, if there's an 80% or greater chance that something will happen, take it that it will happen. And so plan your whole approach to work, your cash flows, all of those things on the basis that it's something that's going to happen. And then just keep monitoring what's going on. So if you look at dictionary definitions of risk, it talks about the negative side. So it's a chance of danger, loss, injury, or other adverse consequence. Whereas the positive aspect of it is that chance of gain. Looking currently, and for a lot of people, it causes people to just sit and not do anything because they just don't know which direction to go. That is, just because we're unsure doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything. It doesn't mean you should just sit there and just be an ostrich about it all. We've got to face up to it, gain an understanding, try things, but have that flexibility, that bite at a time approach that was being talked about, so we can at least move forward. The GOMO of Chris's. So we need to understand what the impact is of the pandemic and the way that's dealt with globally, as locally, the lockdowns locally, but also what does the economic recession mean, not just in UK terms, but in global terms. And at last, we're now beginning to get an idea of post-Brexit and the things that were talked about in the Queen's speech at Parliament, etc., is giving us more of a roadmap of what new regulations are going to be prioritised, etc. So there's lots of things we need to be thinking of in that global context. And as I was saying earlier, it's more than just health and safety. There's the financial, but there's also corporate governance and compliance with regulations and things, reporting things in that side, bringing it down to a lower level. And chocolate making, this is a good example. You're looking at revising how your processes are working, you're bringing in new machinery, what's the risks around that, people related. It's interesting that suddenly we're finding that the hospitality industry can't get people to work there anymore. They're short of staff. And I think that probably wasn't totally expected, because we've been saying people are out of work. But people have different expectations of life now.
Can I jump in on that?
Just looking at some examples.
Can I? Oh, go on.
Yep.
Just
yeah.
sort of reflecting on Mark and Emma's, and Mark in particular's conversation around the fact of, as said, Brexit and different supply chain activity for you today means that you're finding out how to deal with a problem where a Lithuanian company has actually added VAT onto your bill. And I guess what that means, I'm not sure what percentage Lithuania have, but if it's 20%, that means that your profit has just gone probably. So in essence, what happened for those that weren't here is our wonderful networking here meant that Mark talked to Louise, who put referred to a particular expert that can possibly help. So again, I'm saying this is the kind of real issue today that's here. 20% on a price is massive. And the fact that we've got the network developing, I am saying, is crucial in these times of uncertainty. This is where we help each other and we seek either guidance or, as said, referral, etc. So just to put that in, this is live, this is today, and this is happening now. Over to you, Leslie.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Right, just going back to this sort of anticipating things, there are different ways that we can look at stuff. So one of the models that's been around for quite a long time, it originated out of marketing and it's moved into more general strategic ways of looking at things, etc. An acronym of PESTLE, and then it's adding on more and more letters after it, so it's often called PESTLE now. But what it's about is there's so much happening out there, is to look at different aspects to help you to hone in on, well, what could be the risks here, what could be the risks there, what could be the risks there, what's happening in the way that we're doing things. So if we look at political, so this is things that are triggered from within central or local government. So this is all the new regulations, the lockdown rules and how they keep flip-flopping, and the new legislation that we're going to have to work with, the new regulations we're going to have to work with, etc. Economic. So this is the business cycle, but also it's the supply, demand, employment. And we've already just today touched on several things that are impacting around here. If we look at social, so what are the trends in this environment here? How are things changing? Are group behaviours changing? So this is where we start looking at our customer segments, but also the behavioural aspect of people. Technology. What new technologies are going to impact us if we don't change? And as well as the classic examples of Kodak, one of the examples I've always loved is that IBM, they weren't leaders actually in coming up with desktop computing and smaller computers, because they made lots of money out of their enormous computers. But in the late 70s, early 80s, somebody started developing a desktop, and the head of IBM said, interesting, we'll use it for our own people. Maybe there's a market for 200,000 desktops. Just not anticipating what those new technologies were going to be bringing in. So we need to be looking at this if we're going to be reshaping our business. And we can't avoid legal. So we need to understand that, as we've been hearing. And then environmental, we're going to touch on this in amongst the sustainability side of things. This has become a big thing. And it actually has a link with social, because more and more people are saying they're looking to buy green, etc. Industry sectors are the trends in here. Some of the implementations of this are using customers or competitors or various stakeholders in their analysis. So whilst the political, economic, social, technical, legal and environmental is the core, there are other factors that you could be looking at. Also, a classic thing that we do when we're looking at a strategy within organisations is what is often most frequently referred to as SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Some people like to call it TOES, which goes threats, opportunities, weaknesses and strengths. It's just the opposite way around. But what it's all about is it's about knowing yourself and your organisation. So start off thinking about looking at you. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you have a lot of? What works really well? But equally, what are your weaknesses? What's going to let you down? What are the holes in the dike that might need plugging, etc.? And then looking at it from an outside perspective. What are your opportunities? What are your threats that are coming there? And what I've actually done in the workbook, which is on Moodle and which was emailed to you today, is I've combined the PESTLE and the SWOT. So what I'd like us to do is to take 15 minutes and just brainstorm through in the context of your business. And I think if each person does it individually, I'm just going to do a stop share on that one. Has everybody had a chance to see their emails this morning? So you hopefully you have got this document. Okay, is there a Word document showing for you?
Yeah, I've got it up.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. So if you work individually on this, thinking of your own organization or Mark and Emma together, so look at this. So the left-hand column, those are the pestily sections that I was referring to. And then think about, in your own organization, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? And it might be that an area is not applicable for you. And then look at outside, coming from outside, what are your opportunities, what are your threats? And just make some notes, think through this, and then we'll do a sharing of the ideas that you have got.
Where it says political,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what I'd put for strengths and weaknesses politically.
Politically,
Can I have a go with this?
Okay, yeah,
So, for instance, we know that part of your business has in the past been kind of doing things on ships.
Yeah.
So, politically, with lockdown and whether you can or can't travel, suddenly what Boris says has absolute kind of meaning. And the problem is that you might have something booked in 6 months ago that suddenly disappears. So your business is vulnerable in that sense because you can't, it's out of control. It's in the politician's control, as an example. And that's probably true of all of our businesses here.
That's made me just think as well of a visa. I'd have to get a visa now for going to.
And you know, your musicians, your co-musicians, are they all UK based? Are they able to get visas?
Yeah.
Is it something, etc.? That kind of.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and another example on that is also the VAT one. If you were doing work, say, in Germany, then the VAT rules that I've understood from when I was working from South Africa and invoicing was, if you were delivering a service within a country, then VAT was applicable in that country.
Right.
But then when you come back here, you've then got the challenge of how do you maintain your accounts reflecting all of that?
I see.
And could you get knocked doubly for taxes and things?
Yeah. Okay.
And just quickly to add, the same example with Mark and Emma is if you've costed out your labour, etc., and suddenly you get given a VAT bill from the country that you're actually in, that means you're probably out of pocket by 15%, 20% because of a political VAT thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and what it's showing is you've then got to go and do some research. What are the VAT regulations now with trading with EU countries? Because to be quite truthful, it doesn't sound correct, but it takes a while for everybody to understand it. And meanwhile, it upsets your flow of goods, flow of material, etc. Does that help?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So is everybody happy just working on their own there? Do I need to put anything back up as a reminder? Okay, right. Let's share what you've got so far, and this is something that you can carry on doing, but it needs to have spent a bit of time as you have done. So, who's going to volunteer to start giving a little bit of feedback? And if you want, you could share the document you've annotated if you want to do.
I don't mind that. I've only got as far as economical. Maybe I was writing too much.
Yeah.
So for political, in terms of Business Wales, I've put strength is that the Welsh Government are very likely to fund another business support programme after this one, because the contract ends in September next year. Local authorities are unlikely to have much resource in-house, so we'll need to access Business Wales to get assistance for local businesses who need help. Weaknesses, reduction in European funding, so any programme will have to be funded from Westminster. Another weakness, travel budgets are tight, so no longer able to see clients in person, which has multiple effects. Opportunities, more businesses will be aware of the Business Wales programme due to Welsh Government publicity through COVID and help administering grants. Plus, everyone has to go to the Business Wales website to see what the grants are. Opportunity to shine and put businesses in good stead for winning the next contract. So with, in particular with the business I work for, it's very likely that we will win the next contract in Mid and North Wales based on our performance through the last year. A threat, the budget for Business Wales contract moving forward may be cut due to having no European investment, which may result in needing to make some advisors redundant.
That's really good. Has that helped going through it, thinking of it in this way?
Well, I've kind of been thinking about that anyway, because obviously if people are made redundant, then I need to think about how I future-proof myself in my role, and what do I need to be doing. And being on this course is very good because it shows that I'm committed to personal development, and other things. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, Jo, do you want to share what you've come up with?
I've done it in a different way. I've gone with things that popped in my head and I've just put them in the box that was appropriate. So for political, the opportunity is there's been more working from home opportunities. As a virtual assistant, businesses have seen that people can work from home and still be able to do their job, whereas before they were opposed to taking people on who were working from home. And another political opportunity is self-employed accounting going online. More businesses are going to have to do their accounts online, and that's something that I've been doing for the gentleman down in London for the last 5 years. I saw all his receipts and put his invoices online, etc. So that's quite a big opportunity for me for the future. Social weaknesses at the moment, I have no time for networking. I wasn't born around this area, and as a virtual assistant, yes, I can work anywhere in the country, but I like to meet people and work with people I know. I find that a lot easier. And for social, another one is there are more people looking for help. After COVID, they decided they want to take a little bit of a back step from their business. They want a little bit more time with their family, and they are more happy to give a little bit of that work away. So they'll get somebody to do their email management, or they'll get somebody to do their social media, so they've got more time to spend with their family. Technological, I'm quick to learn new programs, so that's a positive for me, but I don't know what's coming next. I really don't know. I don't have the time to keep checking on what's coming next. Legal, I need to keep up on changes. I know of one legal threat, which is IR 35. There's a lot of companies being put off using subcontractors from IR 35 because they don't understand it. So they've just decided, no, we won't bother. Where there is a tool online, I think it was through Business Wales, that you can go through your IR 35 and whether you are covered by that or not. Environmental, I work from home, so there's not much travelling. So that's a positive. And industry, strength, I'm already established and have been for a few years. Weaknesses, I'm a one-man band, which doesn't help. If I was ill or anything, then that's my business closed for a while. Opportunity is to set up an agency, which I mentioned a few weeks ago, to get other people on board and expand what my business can do. And the threat is that there are a lot more people deciding to become virtual assistants and work from home after COVID.
Yep.
And that's as far as I've got so far.
That's good. Right. So, Andy, do you want to share what you've got? And then we'll do a recap on it all.
Yeah, sure. So on political, I've put my strengths is that all my band members are based within the UK. Weaknesses, visas are required to work within the EU. Constant lockdowns and travel restrictions, which would limit us doing gigs abroad. The opportunity is there's more staycations within the UK, so there's more venues that will potentially need entertainment within the UK, so we don't have to travel as much. And the threat is cancellation of contracts and loss of work. Economical, strengths, I've got cash reserves within the business. Weakness, unable to generate more income due to lockdowns and uncertainty. The opportunity, I've put self-employed income support scheme and time to do courses such as this one. The threat is loss of income and work. Social, I've put, we've got a good social media presence. One of our weaknesses is we can be more consistent with our posting online, and also I've got a website which is it's getting some updates done on it, but it's taking a little bit too long. So really, the website needs to be finished. The opportunity to gain knowledge through these sort of courses, and also the opportunity to network with, again, people on the courses. And the threat is loss of work and income, and not optimizing our social media presence.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And with social, also think about how has the behavior of your customers changed? Has the customer profile changed, with this limit of the number of people in venues and things like that? But also, how are people going to, is there a behavioural change due to lockdown which will have an impact on what you're offering? And that then feeds back into the model of what does it mean to your customer segments.
I'm not sure, to be honest, because I haven't seen anyone or haven't done a gig in over a year. I don't know yet. To be confirmed on that one, I think.
Yeah. Chris?
Just to say, the value, I believe, of these strategic tools like Pastelli is not just to go away from this session without action, but to actually get yourself a to-do list and say, if we've identified an opportunity, clearly that's an opportunity that you need to be exploring. If it's about kicking ass with your web designers, it's that. So, as I say, that we've obviously got the luxury of just chatting about things here, but I'm definitely saying make these activities to-dos because you've seen the future. Act.
Yeah.
Yep. Emma, what about yourself?
Right, sorry, I got caught up with a customer, but
it's okay. Yeah.
I did notes for political and economical. For political, I've said people buying more British goods because of Brexit for numerous reasons, supporting our own economy. Obviously, imported goods have become more expensive potentially. And I think as a nation, maybe we're starting to think about protecting our own jobs and skill sets. And also lack of travel, we have no choice really than to buy more local products. You okay? Yes, please. anything. Weaknesses, I put unrest in countries that we deal with. For example, with cocoa, we've recently had an email from one of our cocoa suppliers in Costa Rica. Sorry, not Costa Rica. Where is it? Mine's gone blank. Anyway, they've got a bit of sort of civil unrest and strikes, and they did this wonderful email to inform us that things might be taking a bit longer, but they were on it, and you know, just to let us know to be prepared. And again, with machinery, like Mark was saying earlier, won't go into that again, but with potential weaknesses are not understanding how things are going to work because it's all new. Sorry, I need to put my glasses on. Opportunities, I've put businesses, particularly in our area here, we're in the tourist area, so businesses are opening up, you know, the hospitality, hotels, etc. So that might offer new possibilities for us, for customers, you know, wanting turn downs. Everyone wants to be stand out now to get those customers back in through the door. So, and it's something we've discussed for a while, you know, a new avenue for us. Threats, new businesses opening up. A lot of people are, you know, they've either been furloughed or they think they've reviewed their lives and said it's time for change. They might be opening up in competition. So we're always watching out for that. Economical, we make everything that we sell. So in that respect, we have more of a margin on our products. So we have our wholesale margin and our retail margin combined on the premises. So we've got more strength, I think, than people just buying in their products and selling them on. We've got more stability, I think. Weaknesses, higher prices potentially from Brexit and the COVID situation. There's a lot of companies we deal with saying, oh, well, our prices have got to go up because, you know, because of COVID, because of staffing issues, you know, low supply on things. So that's a weakness. Opportunities, taking on new customers who are looking for standout products. As I said, with the political thing, we're finding that customers want something unique, especially made for them. And that's another avenue for us. And threats, prices of raw ingredients rising. That's always a threat for us if we can remain competitive. And that's it. That's as far as I got.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Okay, so let me just ask you as a group, using a tool like this, does it have any value in helping to focus your thinking?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
As you
So,
say, it's like looking into the future, isn't it? You can sort of work out for yourself, you know, where the path leads.
yeah.
And it's looking at the opportunities as well and thinking and focusing on those as well. You've got to focus on the weaknesses and try and improve those, but if you can go with the opportunities and try and go off in a different direction possibly and do things a bit differently, I think that helps too. So it does help you focus your mind a little bit.
Okay, good. Chris?
And I'm going to encourage, it's something that Leslie and I do constantly, is be looking for this trends, as well as kind of having these structures to be able to explore, like Pastelli and SWOT, and adding them together is quite powerful. But have a look at Forbes and McKinsey and different things that are actually telling you what the trends are, what's coming up, what's the big things, and to, you know, so that there's times we don't have to guess, but we stay aware and ahead of the game by looking at what innovations are happening within the industry that we work in itself, and potentially that gives us avenues to actually create a different way in which our future is set up.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yeah. A key thing about these are that they're tools. So they're not standalone. They don't give you a complete answer. They're intended to stimulate your thinking and to help you have some more structure to your thinking and your brainstorming, so that you can then pull out ideas, prioritize ideas. You're not necessarily going to address every single thing that you've noted down, but pulling out, okay, what are some of those main areas that we now need to think about, going back to our canvas, going back to customer segments or to the products and things like that, or that will need to go into your way that you're going to be managing. So if I go back to the slides.
Well, on the threat things, it's quite important for businesses to look at what the threats are and see if they can mitigate them in any way.
Yes.
Because if you can, then you're reducing threats to your business. Just give an example. So last year when we went into COVID and lockdown, we knew we were going to have to deal with a lot of potentially very vulnerable, angry, frustrated businesses. And at that point, I wanted to protect myself because I saw that as a threat. If you do or say something wrong, will someone come after you personally for the advice you've given? So at that point, I joined the union so that I felt protected, throughout that period in the advice that I was giving people.
That's a really good example. Thank you, Louise. And we need to think that way. And also, as well, this slide here, when we start thinking about things, we can, as we start looking at the way we operate or looking at what we're doing on projects, we need to think about the threats and opportunities around our processes and around our resources, but also about around the product. So very often we think just about the processes, not about the product, or vice versa. So looking at threats and opportunities around the products, the things we deliver, that impacts your design and your marketing and things like that, whereas the processes and resources are more to do with the day-to-day things. What I've put in here is I've actually typically use on a project as a risk register. So this is moving down to a more operational level, but this is quite a useful approach to take. This is just an example of a simple risk register where you're identifying a risk area. So as you already started talking about, just looking at things on that pestle swap table, key materials might not be available. So then start looking at what could be the cause of it. So in this example here, a supply chain disruption because of COVID, or there's a national shortage of a particular material, or it's stolen on the way to your premises. So it's a wide range of causes. You then need to think of, well, how likely is it to happen? Because you can't worry about everything. So just using, in this example, a low, medium, or high way of rating the probability, but just knowing a cause isn't enough. You need to be able to say, what is the consequence of that cause? So to describe, how will we see the effect? So for example, if the supply chain's disrupted, it could be that the lead time becomes unpredictable and it's at least twice as long. Another effect could be that costs increase due to the demand, and Emma's already given us an example of that happening. But also we need to know, well, does that hurt us? So the way I like to talk about is the effect is how we see things, but we need to understand what is the impact of that effect. So some of the classic areas is what's going to be the impact on time. And in this example, there's a delay. Is there an impact on cost, on the deliverable itself, on safety, or other aspects of things? And then it's not just enough to say, ouch, these can go wrong. We now need to think of, what do we need to do to try and prevent that situation arising, or to reduce that impact that we're going to have? So if my examples here, giving as identifying lead times, ordering earlier, fixing fixed price contracts, things like that. But because things can happen, also think about, if it does happen, how do I recover? and your recovers go into your plan Bs. These are your contingency that you're keeping in hand. And the value of thinking, how do I recover, is if a situation does arise, you're not now having to think quickly, perhaps under stress, how am I going to recover? You've already had some ideas, so you can look at those ideas and say, well, what of these could work? And if they're going to work, then implement it. You're not losing time on responding quickly. So that's quite a useful,
Jo.
and
I've got one actually for me that I thought up recently. Where I live, it's quite rural, and we do get power cuts quite regularly, and the internet can go off, etc. And all my work, self-employed and employed, is based from home. So we have had our camper van set up with sockets in it and a battery, etc. So I can work in the camper van. And I've got a mobile hotspot as well now, so I can work from anywhere. So I'll be joining you next week from North Yorkshire on holiday. But it just makes things flexible, and it means that if we do lose power at home, I can still work. Yep. So it's just a small example, but it's something I could pop in there.
Yeah. And that is a really good practical example. That's the reality of what it's about, is it's that thinking ahead and coming up with those alternative ways that will cushion you with what's going on. And what we're looking at is it's all about prioritizing. I call it prioritizing worry. Because if you've got a high probability and a high impact, or a high probability and a medium impact, or a medium probability and a high impact, anything that falls in those three categories, they're going to burn you, they're going to hurt. And I'm quite cruel, I say, if you identify something and say this could happen, and you carry on not doing that modification like the one Jo's just described, you deserve all the sleepless nights you're getting. Because that's what it's all about. At the very least, you need to try and put something in place to reduce the probability or to reduce the impact. Now, it may be that you have to take out something like insurance, which will reduce the cost impact if something happens. Hence things like the holiday insurance that's around. But at the very least, you need to move them down to this diagonal line. And anything that falls in the low, don't worry about it. Don't lose sleep over that. It's the highs and the mediums are the ones that you need to be adjusting what you're doing, because they're having an impact on your business. And if you just give an example, this is a real example. A company that I know about, they provide, it's actually health tablets that they're selling, which are imported from America, and they have lots of customers for it. But they hit a situation where the stock was being delayed coming in, and Amazon wanted the Amazon orders they were getting daily could basically take all of their stock. But then they've got other regular customers, so if they just satisfied all of the Amazon orders, they wouldn't have any stock for anybody else, and they'd lose their customer base. So the cause was that the supplier chain levels required components from Wuhan, and they didn't know when it was going to return to normal. So the effect was they couldn't produce the ordered goods, so they couldn't satisfy all the orders. So their recovery was to seek alternative suppliers, or to remove the items from the stock list. And then another cause of the problem was that the air freight in lockdown was suddenly so limited, so it was taking 2 weeks longer for things to actually come through compared to the previous year. So their prevention was to research and trial alternative suppliers. And then the recovery was to actually tell people what the situation was. And then a big recovery was to introduce quite complicated algorithms into the computer system to allocate the stock dispatch and to make sure Amazon was aware they weren't going to get all their orders filled every day. So it's a practical example of things that have happened during lockdown. So what I'm advocating is that you actually set out how you're going to manage these, look at what the causes is, what the effect is and the range of it, then define the actions to stop, the actions to recover. And then, as Chris has been saying, this needs to go into your plans, into your activity plans, your costs, your timeframes, etc. And do it exactly like Joe was saying. So in the workbook, what you'll see in the workbook is there is a template there. So from the assignment perspective, you can put at least 3 risks that you've identified into here so that we can see that you've understood how it's going, and hopefully it's something that's going to help you, as well as populating, giving us this populated. So what you can do from an assignment point of view, 40% of the marks are actually allocated to this topic, and all we're really looking at is just those 2 tables. We're not looking at lots of verbose stuff and write-up. So if you put ideas into here and put things into here, and then also be taking this back to your business planning. So we'll expect to see in your business model that you're looking at going forward how your realization of the need to manage risks, how those have actually modified how you're looking at your business, and that you're not just carry on saying, yay, we're high risk. Chris, do you want to add in comment there?
I've sort of got a question for Louise. In terms of kind of, and the big fingers crossed with Business Wales, have you got a plan B?
Well, I'm doing some reading and stuff around. So I've just bought the Financial Times book on business coaching, and I'm starting to read through that. My plan is that for some of my clients next year, I will use some of the time allocated to them and practice some of the techniques. So the time will be against Business Wales, but it'll be more of a formalized business coaching style session. But that probably be with, more established clients who I've dealt with for a couple of years, people who know me a bit better.
Yeah.
And
but the reality is that fingers crossed, I'm hoping I don't need to worry too much, because I think we're fairly sure that it will go ahead. And in terms of number of advisors, I'm fairly confident that I would hopefully get a position. So
great. And I don't want you to lose sleep about that. Again, our first part will very definitely be looking at sustainability. So there's elements of this that's perhaps kind of academic, but mind expanding, I hope. And then we will be back into the kind of the business of business and the crunch canvas. And that's something I developed, I don't know, about 5 years ago to work with the business model canvas. And because most of my professional life has been about helping big businesses to transform through innovation, the clear joy of innovation, if you like, is that it's creative, expansive, exciting, etc. However, I created the canvas to give us something that says, if we've had kind of divergent thinking about our business and areas to expand and develop, we need a really very strong way of measuring whether this is a good idea or not. So very much the crunch canvas is, as it says, is once you've kind of explored potential possibilities, etc., crunch time. Is this going to be a smart idea? So anyway, that's the part 2 of this. So let me share my screen and make a start, if I can. Okay. Not okay. Here we go. So this kind of session is very much going to be about sustainability by design. So perhaps if I segue onto the topics that Leslie's just been talking about, and if you like, looking into the crystal ball of the future. And I guess this is more surmising, but I think you'll probably all agree that judging by media and the kind of general talk around climate change and carbon zero things, that we ignore sustainability by design at our peril, because it would seem that consumer choice is ever growing, that we're demanding and choosing products and services that are proven to have sustainability by design as part of their core. Now, I guess just to kind of predicate this a little bit, what do I mean by sustainability by design? And let me give you a little story to kind of set us going. So I work with quite a few of the departments at Bangor University. One of the departments I work for and with is product design. Now, the example I'm going to give is a real example. I just finished kind of a lecture with a second year product design group who all have work placements and actually practice their design skills with real live people that want design services, real customers. And I better keep this it was for a farmer who happened to be blessed by some very kind of clear spring water and had created a well and was bottling water. And the water, it was very popular and a good customer base. So to expand that particular part of the business, he decided to box water, i.e. to have it in bigger containers, if you like, and sell it in boxes. So I just had finished the lecture and my student was actually meeting the client in the vestibule at the university, and they were talking about the progress of the product. So cardboard box, and in overhearing them, the actual receptacle in the cardboard box for holding the spring water was plastic. And inappropriately, I overheard and went over and I said, "You've got to be joking, haven't you? Why would you bring a new product to market? Cardboard's fine, but if we're talking about sustainability by design, why on earth haven't you looked for a substitute to actually hold the spring water in the box. I won't bother sort of to relate the rest of the story, but suffice to say that it did kind of encourage and enable the designer and the client to think, oh, yeah, that's good. Because what that actually means, as we know, that on the side of the packet, we can say that this is sustainable design and it's all recyclable. So that's kind of my apocryphal story here, that I'm going to make the proposition that for anything we do from now on, we should be exploring sustainability as a key item. And more than that, we also know that carbon footprints, etc., are starting to become legislated. So back to Pestelli, this is something that we're probably going to get taxed on, is our carbon footprint. So this particular section is around how we might work with this as businesses, knowing that it'll mean that we have to change our processes and how we do things and how we source things. And in the process of that, I'm suggesting that I'm going to call it the bounce factor, is that people will increasingly, I hope, be selecting their products and services, as said, according to how environmentally friendly they are and how explicitly that's done. And I'm also going to kind of bring up the dark side of this particular thing, is that we know also that big corporations will give us one product that's wonderfully sustainable, and they will advertise that to death, making us think that they're nice and clean, environmentally friendly, when the rest of their products and services anything but. And you're probably aware that this has the wonderful term greenwashing. So again, it's an apocryphal story that says almost, make sure that it does what it says on the tin. And I'm suggesting that all the indicators are that to be working with sustainability by design is a smart thing to do for the future. So let's kind of, if I can. So already, as said here, the UK has passed laws to end contributing to global warming, bringing all greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Now, if COP26 in Glasgow has anything to do with this 2050 will be shrunk back to 2030. And as we probably know from climate change statistics, is that things are getting worse faster than was thought. So in terms of our businesses, let's start with this as a carbon footprint and ask the question, so how do we measure our carbon footprint? And what are the sorts of things that we're actually needing to look at in terms of what that entails? So as we'll see from this rather rough and ready picture, it could be about your travel. It could be about and whether you're petrol, diesel, hybrid, or electric. It's also about your recycling. It's about what you do with waste, and I guess what you buy that you make sure is recyclable as opposed to landfill, etc. It's about looking at your processes, your industrial processes. Now, I know that for us here, perhaps Emma and Adam, you are one of the few here today that will have industrial processes, and those in a sense are also kind of not massive, etc. Again, flipping back to our cars, but are we fossil fuel engaged? And I'm going to say also that this is also, you know, if you invest money, does the money that you invest go to banks and hedge funds, financiers that finance coal and fossil fuel with your money and pension funds, etc.? It's also about kind of particularly air travel and how many air miles that you might use, etc. Now, I guess in my business that's people systems oriented, most of the time I was, you know, certainly for 10 years ago and previously, I spent most of my time on an airplane. And to my shame, my carbon footprint, I'll never get to kind of square it off in the time I've got. But travel, air travel, how has that changed and how could you change it, etc. So let me stop sharing for now and start asking questions. So carbon footprint, general question, what does it mean for us? And are we aware of it? And if we are, what, if anything, do we actually do about it? Any?
For me, well, for carbon footprint, I believe is how much carbon you're producing into the environment whilst doing what you do or doing your job. For me, it's all about driving and flying. More driving. I do about 80,000 miles a year driving normally, not the last year. One thing I could do would be to get an electric vehicle or a hybrid. And I know by 2030, I think they're all going to be electric. The only thing that put me off that is just the cost of electric cars at the minute. They're so expensive that, you know, for me, it doesn't really make sense to buy one at the minute, but I understand soon everyone will have one. But that's the main thing I could do would be to change my car and fly less and cruise less and things like that.
And just as, because clearly the challenge of this is, you know, how does that affect your livelihood to actually be contemplating seriously how to reduce your footprint? You know, from what you've said, you know, cruise ships is part of your income stream. I have to tell you that cruise ships are perhaps one of the biggest polluters on the planet, but that doesn't help your conscience. And I suppose I'm exploring as well, how do we square earning a living with, I suppose, the broader context, if you like, of the effect that earning that living has on the environment and the planet. Again, the jury's out on how we balance and square that off. But have you any thoughts about it? Because I'm kind of projecting this forwards and saying, if the topic of this section is sustainability by design, i.e. that we're conscious of what we do, but how do we put baked beans on the table? How do we earn a living? Any thoughts, Andy, on that?
With the cruises, I'm not really sure. Other than turning down the work, there's not really anything I can do to change the way they do their thing. But just in my own world, the van we go out to gigs with, that could be electric. Again, it's just a cost thing at the moment. I don't know if you've seen the cost of if you look at like a transit van fully electric, it's unbelievable. The cost, like £45,000 or something. Mm-hmm. So that, and I don't really do anything else that creates massive carbon. You know, everything there's not a lot of waste with what I do. It's just turning up and singing and putting on a show. There's not a huge amount of plastic being created or anything like that. So it's mainly the transport that I could change.
Quite hard in Andy's business, but you know, with everybody else's, it's about those small changes in, you know, getting staff to make those small changes. So it could just be using LED lights, could be making sure people go to the you know, the coffee area, that they only put 1 cup's worth of water into the kettle as they boil it, you know, if they don't involve filling it right the way up. So it's all the small changes which could be built into a policy, and that policy, you know, reflected out to clients to say that actually within my business I'm doing all the things that I can do in order to make it as green as possible, you know, going back to resources and stuff, choosing cardboard over plastics and things like that.
One of my job that I've taken on, so I've gone from being self-employed to employed. One of the things that's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months is he's going to get me a hybrid on as a company car, which was a big pull for me to take the job, because I would never in my wildest dreams have ever bought a new car or had the chance of having a new car. We've just not been in the market for anything like that ever.
Aging to 15-year-olds and what have you, because they're gonna have to sort out the mess that certainly my generation has created. And of course, these are the customers that are coming up, and they are totally aware and will be buying according to what's on the packet and how environmentally friendly they are. So that does become something of a stimulus for us, I guess, to engage within that context. Now, let's just kind of explore a bit more here. So for instance, too, let me show this next slide. Now, this is an example from Western Kentucky University. And what they say here is Western Kentucky University works hard to minimize its carbon footprint, but we can do more. And so what they're actually doing is using this journey that they're taking to reduce carbon as an advertising potential to actually attract students, etc., because of their environmental credentials. And what they're actually doing there, which again is, I'm not suggesting that you go to this extent, but what they're doing here is they're actually showing us the level of their emissions, and this is in metric tons. And you know what we can see here is that the electricity usage is massive, so that's a huge kind of carbon producer, but they're looking at their use of natural gas, petrol, refrigerants, agriculture, electricity, air travel, study abroad, solid waste, wastewater, paper, etc. And so they're already auditing it. And as I've said, they're making it a value proposition, part of their value proposition to attract students and, actually share their social responsibility, etc. And, as we can see there on the right-hand side is looking really at this CO2 coexist kind of thing, and how it's actually, the more we do, it kind of helps us with sea level rises, ocean acidification, Arctic ice reduction, which again, for those of you that know, I'm part of the Real Ice team, of which we've had the students working on. So we're actively engaged in attempting to re-ice the Arctic and actually get paid with carbon offsets. So anyway, so it's a means whereby we can boast our improvements in a sense, because that's potentially the best we can think about, etc. So again, let me move on. Now, we've got life cycle analysis, which again is a scientific way of actually being able to segmentize the actual carbon footprint we've got and environmental impact. So part of the first entry in is, what about raw materials, energy extraction? How is that kind of affecting carbon footprint, etc.? Preliminary production, this in the manufacturing process and how that impacts. We've got the manufacture of and the end products themselves. And so, for instance, one of the key contributors is cement. And cement has a massive carbon footprint. So the kind of cement we might buy for construction makes a difference very much to the carbon footprint we might have. It's also about, and this is affecting the group we've got here as much as anything else, is about use and operation. So, and all of the kinds of things that you were all talking about are very much how to reduce kind of the carbon footprint in small ways, but ways that actually make a difference. And then the end of life phase itself, which is how we recycle it, throw it away, and what we do with what's left after we've gone through the process of what we do for work. Now, some good news is, and I don't know if any of you know this, but here on Anglesey, up at the old aluminium plant, we've got a new business called Orthios, and they are actually investing £200 million in massive machinery, that one of which actually is able to recycle plastics almost to 1% by actually making it into oil, actually making it into chemicals, etc., etc. So this is Orthios. It's on Anglesey. It's being done on an industrial scale. So I guess things are happening that at least give us hope, etc., as we operate. Now, just to final kind of pitch on this one is that we've also got economists, and this one's Kate Raworth, who's actually a Cambridge economist, who's created, instead of gross domestic product as a way of valuing our kind of UK value, is she's creating new ways of measuring what we do that isn't just about profit and turnover, etc. But she's introducing us to the kinds of things that saying, you can see here the kind of light green part here in the middle-ish, or on the outskirts of the middle, that we've got ecological ceilings around water, food, health, education, politics, etc., etc. And these are becoming measurables that get fed into government, etc. And it's very much about this change from, and I might, again, in semi-prejudicially say, for me, the three most dangerous words in business is to maximize profit. And when this is done without kind of thinking about our impact, then to me, there's something not very good about it. And this kind of alternative view is something that's about thrival. It's about how we thrive as individuals, communities, countries, etc. And that thrival would, as Kate Raworth says here, is not just a singular kind of thinking, but it's very much complexity thinking. It's an ecosystem of how we as a business interact with our communities and hope that we're actually producing value and thrival rather than kind of damage. Now, let me kind of sort of finish this kind of sharing for now, but get back and say, what do we think? How we're here with innovation, refreshing our businesses. I'm putting this in as a kind of an essential part of how we move forwards and think forwards. Of course, it has to be appropriate, but any thoughts? And Leslie, I think you'd got your hand up.
I was just going to say, in the notes that are on Moodle, there are the web links to videos of Kate talking at conferences about her model, which are actually worth watching.
Yeah, she's awesome. Well worth a listen. But what do we think, again, just to kind of wrap up this topic of kind of, is it something, Louise, you add into your innovation is making the cost of these things just go. Now, on a political edge, there's a lot of money being placed and a lot of lobbying from the fossil fuel companies to make it that being able to innovate in wind power, tidal power, etc., is the lobbyists are encouraging government to make sure that it costs a fortune to kind of develop these renewables, etc. But again, we can hope that that will change and that the cost of these things that are astronomical, like our electric kind of minibuses, etc., actually will come down and actually be much more economically viable than their fossil fuel equivalents, etc. Again, we're in transition. So, and it's complicated. So as we're saying, this small steps makes good changes, because it changes our consciousness of how we utilize things and how perhaps we look at labels and assess whether we want this or not.
I used to work on a boat when I left school at 16.
Invented a way of, you know, making another part of the cocoa product into something even better, so that it's almost again about, I think, about mindset, which you've already got with your Cococello kind of ideas. I like that. And again, for me, it feels like this, that we use these things as opportunities. And to me, you know, this is again a sidestep here, but we've got potentially a lot of unemployment, particularly for the younger kind of members of community. And I say to all of them, think renewable. If you're gonna get trained, if you go to fossil fuel, you're dumb. Go renewable, upskill, and again, digital transformation. So upskill in things that are actually going to be growth areas, and it will presumably mean long-term employment opportunities, etc. Anyway, any last thoughts before we move on to crunching? Okay. So
do we need a 2-minute
break?
break?
Yes, we can do that. Thank you for.
Do we need it?
Okay, so as said, homegrown management kind of thing here. So how this works is that I'll just quickly go through the 4 sectors, and we'll kind of work briefly on each of the sectors. But what I want you to be thinking about, so as said, the purpose that I created this is that working in innovation means that, unfortunately, some people get carried away with their imagination and potential and forget to crunch the idea to make sure that it isn't going to bankrupt them, etc. So well, I might as well go on the top box. Sustainability is kind of 2 parts here. It's all the stuff that we've just talked about, but clearly it's also about how long will this product or service last for in the market? Is it a fad? Is it something that has permanence? And you know, minimizing eco impact. What's quite important is, are there any unintended consequences about what we're doing, that we've created a monster and didn't mean to, etc. But essentially, from both points of view, sustainability is, will this be good for my business? And will it do the next bits of the model? So is it feasible? Now, I'm minded to get back to kind of Emma and Mark, is what seems to be remarkable about what you're creating is you've got more brands than I've had hot dinners, and that in one sense is that it would seem to be, and I know we talked about this last week, but that actual capacity and how you can actually produce all of these different brands, etc., is theoretically not quite as feasible as it might be for a bigger company. Now, I get how you're kind of keeping it small and easy to manage and. But essentially, feasibility is asking these questions. Can we do this business idea? Do we know what the work entails? What is the work to be done? And this is where Leslie and project management come in, is breaking it down and saying, what will, in order to have this cocoa gin, what do we need to do? Getting bottles, getting labels, etc. What resources are needed? How much time will it take within the products, within the schedule we've got? How much space will we need to actually do this? Square meterage. Can we do it with the actual square meterage we've got? Have we got the cash to invest in this? Have we got the right amount of information, etc., to inform what we're producing? Equipment, as you said, again, Emma, etc., is where do we get the equipment from, etc.? Can we? What exactly do we need? And people, well, that's my interesting question for you, and you've probably already answered it, but that's an interesting aspect, if you like, of capacity building, is how and if that would be possible. Feasibility is also about competitors. Who are we actually kind of up against? And in pricing terms, etc., are we able to be competitive? And again, within feasibility, as spoken about, I think a couple of sessions ago, about collaborators. Is there a way in which we can not have to, that we can outsource confidently, productively, and profitably, etc.? Our third box, well, no, let's flip over to the viability. Again, is what we're proposing with this refreshing our business, is it cost effective? Can we fund it? Can we afford to do it? Etc. And that's not to say if we can't afford it, then where can we source finance from, and what help can we get, etc. Out of it? And again, I'm not sure if Louise has got kind of people who are doing financing, etc., to point in that direction. Income. How do we actually compute how much we're going to make from this? Again, your cocoa gin is great. They flew off the shelves is music to our ears, but does the expenditure and the profit kind of make sense? Is it that you've got to create 1,000 bottles, or does 100 do it, etc.? Cash flow, crucial. cash is king. So even if we've sold £1 million worth of stuff that we're not going to get paid for 90 days, and that means that we are begging the bank for liquidity and cash flow, and they're saying, sorry, mate, can't be done, then the lack of cash flow, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of business advising, is the fastest way into oblivion that I know within a business sense. So we need liquidity and we need finance to be able to cover that if we haven't already got it in our kind of war chest. And sometimes it's about creating a minimum viable product. So rather than creating 1,000 of these things, is let's do a minimum viable product and test it. It sounds like, Emma, your 100 bottles could be your test, and it sounds like it passed muster and was the right thing to do. And our final but really crucial thing is that my experience again with startups and creating new businesses is that often, and quite rightly, they come from our interests. They come from potentially our hobbies. They potentially come from something that we like to do. Now, I'm saying this is good. However, I've got numerous examples of that kind of hobby business that hasn't been put under the desirability filter. And what this says is this a value proposition? You may think this is the best thing since cocoa gin, but will the rest of the world? Is this just your fantasy? And have you done any market research? So again, going back to the first sessions and value propositions, does it solve a user problem? Which can be, how do we have gorgeous gin that we've not tried before that just happens to taste like chocolate, cocoa, and whatever else? Will users like using it? And the best way to find out is to test it. Give it to people to play with and find out. Don't just open up a shop and spend hundreds of thousands of quid kind of refurbishing it, etc., and find you've got no customers. I won't go through that story again. Is it better than the competition, or in what ways does it compete? And whether that's on price, on quality, on the sizzle of your kind of promotional materials, etc. And the best bit, which is why it's desirability, is will users fall in love with it? Will it kind of sell itself? As we've said quite interestingly, my experience of North Wales when I first came here a long time ago is that we exist here by word of mouth. It's changing a bit. We don't quite like brash advertising, etc., rather than it's word of mouth. And so when users love something, they will be our best salespeople, and they will share it with their friends. They'll recommend it, etc. So that's our kind of the crunch canvas. These are the killer questions that we need to be asking about any new enterprise that's an addition to the products or services we provide. And if we don't do this, I'm going to say it's at our peril. So let me kind of work this. So let's try the feasibility thing. I've just been through it, but I'm going to leave it up here. So what I'd like you to do is to be thinking through, hopefully, these kind of new reshaped ideas that you've been having, and just ask you to contemplate its feasibility for now. So I'm going to give you, I don't know, 5 minutes to talk to yourself or Emma and Mark each other and ask yourself, in what ways is what I'm kind of thinking about feasible? And if I think about it properly, what are the barriers? What are the stumbling blocks towards feasibility that now I'm looking at it in more detail? I can see that this isn't going to be quite the walk in the park that I imagined it would be. So let's give you kind of 5 minutes to maybe 3, all the idea you've got, i.e. this is very much the value propositions, better than competition, users like it. And I'm also going to slam in for us to think also the viability, because in a sense, I know Andy sort of mentioned a little bit of the viability of his product, etc., and sustainability. So I'm going to crunch those 3 things together for our next kind of navel gaze to see whether our new ideas kind of fit the bill. So can we fund it? Is it something that kind of really makes sense, and we're going to have the cash flow, the finance, etc., and again around the sustainability aspect of it. So go. I'm going to give us 3 minutes again just to have a think in Welsh language and a globally responsible Wales. So as I say, this is enshrined in Welsh law, and kind of it's a reflection of the SDGs, the sustainability goals that the UN has produced, and I think that makes us in Wales ahead of the game. So I conclude my session with just that and say, if you want to know more, Google it, but it's all very good. Now, we are at the end of something. Any final thoughts, Leslie? It's looking like yes. You're on mute, Leslie. You're on, Leslie, you're on mute.
Sorry, I couldn't find anywhere myself. Sorry, I didn't mean to kick you out as quickly as I did, Chris. I was just trying to bring up the slide and it kicked you out. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you, everybody. We've gone through a lot to do. Before the next session, we're going to be looking at transformation and people-orientated things. So have any of you seen this cartoon and this theme of Who Moved My Cheese? It's actually a book as well. The video clip for it is in the notes and on Moodle. So if you go to Moodle, you'll see it. There's 2 video clips. There's a short one, And then there's the original one, and you'll see it actually describes underneath it, and it says it's poor quality. It is worth watching the poor one, just if you can just live with the fact that it's not brilliant quality. And then there's a second one which explains the model, but we will be discussing it next week. So if you've not seen it before, enjoy Who Moved My Cheese, because it is fun. And I'm going to stop sharing. Right. So I think that's it from the admin side of things, and we'll hear again next week. Christo, anything else from your side?
Well, great stories, everybody. And as ever, I love the participation you all bring to this and the different stories that give us different angles on how to do things and how to look at things. And this wonderful kind of, hey, what do I do about my VAT as it's coming into the border, Louise? Oh, I've got a guy I can put you on. For me, network is 25% of the battle of being in business, and I love the team we've got here. It's really good. So I guess it's have a great week.